And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed. And I will put my law in their minds and write it in their hearts.
Shalom, hello again. Well, continuing our study of God's covenants with men, and we're up to the land covenant. Last week we talked about the Mosaic law. The Mosaic covenant gave the enormously complex Jewish laws, the first public health laws, and so on to the people out there in the Sinai. And then when it came time to really occupy the land of Israel, God made a new covenant with them, correctly called the land covenant. I say correctly because we had fallen into, over the centuries, saying the Palestinian covenant. Obviously, that nomenclature isn't very good anymore, since there are people who call themselves Palestinians pretending that they own this land. Therefore, it's an issue to use the term Palestinian covenant. My Schofield Bible has a heading, the Palestinian covenant, but there's an excuse for that. Schofield wrote the Bible in 1907 when the whole world called the land Palestine because the Jews were away and everyone was using the Roman name. It was put on there in the 2nd century in one of those final solutions to the Jewish problem. But the recent publications have no excuse. The MacArthur Study Bible came out last year, I think, and it has a map called Palestine in Christ's time. Well, that's a crazy statement. There was no such country in Christ's time. One of our viewers actually wrote to MacArthur, but got an awkward defense back from some assistant of his trying to justify the term Palestine for Israel in Jesus' time. Let me tell you something. The Bible never uses the term Palestine in reference to the land of Israel. One more time. The Bible never uses the term Palestine in regard to Israel. It uses forms Palestina in the Old Testament in referring to the coast of Gaza where the Philistines live. That's quite correct. Philistine territory was called some form of the word Palestine back in that day, but never for the whole land of Israel. And the New Testament does not use the term Palestine at all. Although MacArthur's notes consistently use it, the New Testament never ever uses it, not even once. Okay, so we understand that. Now, the land that was given to Israel, well, there's different versions of it. Even today we're arguing about it. And this is a very modern subject, so to speak. Here we're talking about a 3,500-year-old covenant, and it's in use every day. They're arguing about, land for peace and who gets this portion of the land, 13% of the land versus 11% of the land. You've been reading the papers. Let's see what God thought. When he talked to Abraham, Genesis 15:18, he specified the boundaries of the land he gave to the Jewish people, to Abraham's seed. He said, "In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates." On a map, that'll show you that it takes in part of the Sinai, it takes in part of Jordan, part of Syria, including Damascus, all the way over to the Euphrates River, much, much larger than the Israelis now hold. It certainly includes the West Bank, so-called, in Israel, Judea and Samaria. It certainly includes the Golan Heights, both of which are in contention in today's news stories, and was given to Abraham by God. It's just that simple. Well, we'll talk on this program with the ex-Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, the leader of the faction that tried to trade land for peace with the Palestinians. And, you may wonder about my having Peres. I have had David Bar-Illan and Netanyahu himself and so on of the right wing, so-called. Shimon is the opposite side. The Shimon Peres is a left-winger, but I want to give everybody their say, and I listen to him. But you evaluate for yourself what he says as far as giving up the land. Let me show you on a chart now back here where the land covenant originally occurred. Now, the first three covenants, the Edenic, the Adamic, and Noahic, were made with mankind. The Garden of Eden, the covenant with Adam, and the covenant with Noah. Then God chooses Israel, and we have the Abrahamic covenant. That one lasts all the way to the millennium. That's the covenant of promise, under which Christian people are saved by the promises to Abraham. Then we come to the period of judges and priests in Israel, and the Mosaic covenant, the law. The law only exists to the coming of the Messiah, does not need it after that. And the land covenant came right after, but it too goes through the coming of Messiah and all the way to his second coming, the millennium, because that is how long Israel is the owners of the land. In other words, perpetually and for always. The land covenant is a conditional covenant. It was not like the Abrahamic, where God said for an everlasting covenant, or the Davidic covenant forever, with no regard for how the people might behave and so on. This one depended on how the people behaved. Reading at the beginning of Deuteronomy 28, "It shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and do all his commandments which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God." And he goes on enumerating blessings. They'll have cattle, they'll be happy in the city and happy in the field. Everything will go right for them until we get to verse 15. This is an iffy covenant. Now we have the other side of the if. "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shall thou be in the city, and cursed shall thou be in the field," and on and on. And the curses just go down. Boy, verse 27, "The Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart, and thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness." And so it just can't be worse, put it that way. So depending on how they behaved, they could stay in the land and prosper, or they would be dispersed and things would get very, very bad. And as you get over to verse 28:64, many say it predicts the Holocaust. "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind, and thy life shall hang in doubt before thee." And he goes on to indicate, and I think it might well be a prophecy of the Holocaust, or at least of Jewish persecution, when they are in dispersion, as most of Israel is now, still outside the land, because they took that option. They did not really obey the Lord, as you read the Old Testament. The Old Testament is, if anything, absolutely truthful, and it shows that they did not obey. When people say the Old Testament, or the New Testament, for example, is anti-Semitic, I say, have you read the Old? It's not that it's anti-Jewish. My gosh, it's written by Jewish writers and Jewish prophets. It's truthful. It's frank. It tells the real story. Now, the whole thing, though, has a wonderfully happy ending. Deuteronomy 30:1-5, "And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I've set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee, and shalt return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all I command, thou and thy children with all thine heart and all thy soul," and so on. So skip to verse 5. "And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it." That is the verse that we use in our tour brochure. We take Holocaust survivors free on our tours. There's no charge, door to door. If you know a Holocaust survivor that wants to go to Israel, let us know, and we will take him free. There's no ifs or small print or anything. We're not an airline. It's a free trip, door to door. But and we print in our brochure, "The Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed." And he says more, "And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers." And we're sort of seeing the outworking of that prophecy today. They are back in the land in part, and they are prospering almost like in the great days of David and Solomon. Furthermore, there's good news in the book of Amos, Amos 9:14 and 15. And I will bring again the captivity of my people of Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. That's exactly what has happened. And they shall plant vineyards and drink the water thereof, and shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them. That's such a good description of modern Israel, an exporter of fruit, a maker of gardens if there is any. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. A simple, straightforward statement that speaks to today's politics and arguments beautifully. Once I put the Jews back in their land, I'll not remove them again. So, there can be a land of Palestine if you like. There can be a separate country, but there will not be a time when we achieve the ultimate the Arabs have bragged about for decades, cast the Jews into the sea. That's not going to happen while God is in charge. You know, if they'll live in the land in obedience, they'll prosper completely and never have to leave. That was the Palestinian or land covenant, as it's incorrectly called the Palestinian covenant. But the land covenant was carried out by such a Jew as Jesus, who was a symbol of obedient living under the law of Moses and an occupier of the land. He did not have to leave because, in effect, he did not disobey. And actually, after the Lord's reign, then there was disobedience and there was rebellion, and they did leave the land again in this great dispersion. There were two great dispersions, really, 586 B.C. when Nebuchadnezzar and the Chaldeans came down on them, and again after the Lord's coming, 70 A.D. when the temple was destroyed, and on to 135 when they were dispersed outside the land a second time. Some people regard it as one long dispersion, but they really had come back and reestablished the Jewish culture in the land, but had to leave again. And in 135, the Romans did the cruelest thing of all, changed the name of the land to Palestine. And from there, we get this word Palestinian. You know, it was 500 years before the birth of Mohammed that this name was given to the land. It was in honor of the old Philistines and has nothing to do with Muslims whatsoever. Excavations in Israel show who owned the land. There are thousands of sites in Israel, 6,000 they say, where 200 have been explored and only 28 completely excavated. There are excavations all over the Middle East, but Syria, Egypt, and even Iraq get the attention of the archaeologists, and Israel does not. The Arabs do not want to have the Jewish past really discovered. They have defaced statues. They have taken the face off King David and off Moses wherever they're represented. The Dead Sea Scrolls at outside Jericho at Qumran. The Palestinians now occupy Jericho, and they want to control Qumran. They want their Dead Sea Scrolls back. Imagine the scrolls written in Hebrew and Aramaic about even older Hebrew books they claim are theirs. Well, we'll go on to the interview with Shimon Peres right now. I just want to say one thing. In the interview, I can't say it any other way. He distorts the population numbers. He says there's an equal number of Palestinians and Israelis. That just isn't so. There are above 5 million Israelis. Some say 4.75 million. But anyway, there's 2.7 million Palestinians. The Israelis just about double the population of the Palestinians in the land. So I wanted to correct that before we start. And now on to the interview with Shimon Peres. Mr. Peres, thank you very much for joining us. You are a former Prime Minister of Israel, and now you are, in effect, a leader of the opposition. Let me ask you first about the Oslo peace process. How do you see it working out?
Right now it doesn't work, but this is the only workable solution that Israel and the Palestinians possess. I do not see any alternative to it.
You still believe this is the way to go?
100%. I think all parties are in need of peace. I think that in a strange way, in order for Israel to remain a Jewish state, we need a Palestinian state on our side. As the Palestinians, in order to remain Palestinians, they have to have a Jewish state on their side. Because we have today on the western side of the land of Israel, 4 million Arabs and 4.7 million Jews. If there will be living under the very same roof. It will be neither Jewish nor Palestinian. It will be binational against the wish of each of the nations. It will be actually a national conflict, not a binational state. And I think it will be a terrible mistake to create a Bosnian-like situation on the land of Israel.
What is happening in the American media, they play up every sort of violence that is happening in Israel.
The Americans?
Well, they're playing it up, I'm saying.
Well, you know, some people complain that the United States is intervening in the peace process of Israel, and that the United States is introducing American dictates into the process. I don't take it. Because what the United States is actually telling both sides is, gentlemen, you have signed an agreement. You asked us to be a witness to this agreement. We don't have any suggestion of our own. But we insist that you will be true to your commitment and to your promise. And I don't see in it an intervention. I think in it, it is a fair-minded proposal. We signed, we have to implement it, we have to respect it, and we cannot have every Monday and Sunday a different plan.
How do you answer those who say that one side or another is not keeping the agreement?
Basically, both sides keep the agreement. In every agreement, you have a gray area, an ambiguous field that stems from the fact that this is an unprecedented agreement. Now, when you have war, everything is clear. You have two armies, you have a front, you have uniforms, you have flags. When you make peace, you have ambiguity, and you have gray areas, which creates problem. Now, peace is not a matter of a plan. Peace is a matter of a partnership. And the main task of each of the two sides is to maintain partnership, to respect each other. If you have a plan and you don't have a partner, you just have a piece of paper. But if you have a partner, you have to cultivate it. You know, it's like stop being a bachelor and becoming a married person. It's a different story. And then you have to pay attention to the other party, to the other partner. And you know, once we have had a joint press conference, and one of the journalists says, "You're standing here with Mr. Peres, and you're talking about Jerusalem becoming the capital of a Palestinian state." So Arafat answered quite properly. He says, "Don't I have the right to dream?" And I added, you know, the difference between a dream and an accord is, for a dream, it's enough to have one. For an agreement, you need two. So let him dream. We have had in the last 50 years 5 wars. Israel won all of them militarily, none of them politically. The Arabs have lost all of them militarily, and for that reason they lost them also politically. What will a 6th war bring?
The wonder. The beauty. The soul of the Holy Land. Come with Zola on his next tour to Israel.
Well, you know, in French you have 2 options, and it's the same in all over the world, I guess. It's all assimilation or to live in the ghetto. Jerusalem and Israeli life offers the possibility to be a Jewish, normal life of Jewish people, to have a good education for our children, and that's why we choose to immigrate.
Yeah, I was born in Morocco.
Oh, in Morocco. How interesting.
Yeah.
And you came here at what age?
I was 15 years old.
Oh, my goodness. So you've been here a very long time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, next year will be the 50th anniversary of this country. What do you think about that?
I think this is great. For the country is really great, and it's going to be better.
You think it will be better?
It will be better.
I think that it's safe to be Jewish in Israel, but not safe Jewish in Budapest, for example. I cannot behave as a Jew in Budapest.
Even now?
Even now. It doesn't happen. I mean, it's good to be a Jew, and this is the best place to be a Jew.
Well, those are the sort of people you meet on Ben Yehuda Street, a walking mall in downtown Jerusalem. They're from 3 different countries, and they appreciate being in the land. They came out of the dispersion and back to the land. Now back to the interview with Shimon Peres. Well, I have personally visited Faisal Husseini, the so-called Palestinian Authority representative for Jerusalem, in the Orient House, and he seemed the same as you. He told a very convincing story of a completely opposite point of view. He thought the Palestinians need to have all of Israel and Jerusalem and so on, and that they had been in the land 5,000 years, he told me.
Okay. I mean, their history has a different calendar from the known one. But it doesn't matter. Look, the world is full of differences. What democracy means is not to try to air out the differences with weapons. It doesn't mean that you're going to kill all the differences. You are not. They will remain. But they will live in peace and not in war.
When you were in office as Prime Minister, you wanted to make peace with Syria. You approached them with an offer of even the entire Golan Heights, and they did not take you up on it. Doesn't that show that the Arabs really don't want peace?
I don't think so. I think they need peace, and for that reason they want peace. Look, nobody has a choice. We have had in the last 50 years 5 wars. Israel won all of them militarily, none of them politically. The Arabs have lost all of them militarily, and for that reason they lost them also politically. What will a 6th war bring? What is the alternative? To kill more young people? To take away the energies and the resources and the food of many people and invest it again in war? I think Assad himself conducted 3 wars as a head of state. He lost all of them.
Well, the Jews have historically wanted one land. They have it now, and they're content with it. I was shown on one of our programs a map of the 7th century Middle East, and the Arabs were all in Saudi Arabia. There were, the name Hebrews was over Israel. There were other names of different peoples over lands, but now all those lands have fallen to the Arabs. And now Israel is up for conquering, and it seems that they are going to solve this problem too.
You know, you cannot unmake history. And if you want to begin with history, then you say you are right if you are right since the 1st century, since the 15th century. When are you beginning to be right? So the only way is to take the existing situation, since you cannot and you shouldn't get rid of a people, either by force or exile. You have to find a way how to create a coexistence. Now, let's not forget that the Jewish people is not based just on a territory. It's also based on a moral code. And never in our history did we dominate another people. And the ones who dominated us disappeared from history.
That's right.
So why should we follow them? You know, 10 commandments, we have just one. Historic frontiers, we have had many. So the moral code is as central and stable as the land.
And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed.
Well, that's the land covenant. And, you know, it's one of those prophecies that you can just watch being fulfilled. A lot of it is completely fulfilled. That is, we're given an option, obey or don't obey. If you don't obey, you'll be dispersed out of the land. Unfortunately, they took that option. They were dispersed. Then it goes on to say, I'll restore you to the land. We're watching that happening today. And other than for our own governments meddling in Israeli affairs, they are coming back and occupying the land once again. And they have enemies within the land. They always did. This is nothing new. You know, let me tell you something. This fighting over is what they're calling the West Bank, Golan Heights, et cetera, and so on. This started 5,000 years ago. Our reporters happen to just ride up. I mean, this is an ongoing thing. If you read the story of Joshua in the land, or David trying to secure the borders, or when the Persians came and occupied, or the Romans occupied, the Greeks occupied, and so on. It's always been this way. It's never been a land easy to hold on to. But that covenant goes on, and it's very, very important because, after all, this is our kingdom being prepared. This is the kingdom of those who believe in the Jewish Messiah. Christians, Gentiles, and Jews who believe in Jesus Christ are going to a kingdom in Israel. He is going to sit on the throne of David, and that will be the center of the kingdom on earth. So the country is extremely important, the most important country in the world today. It's being prepared as a beautiful oasis now by the Israelis. It's being planted and it's being watered, and the thing is coming to life again. You know, when it was Palestine over the last 18 centuries or so, nobody fought over it. Nobody wanted it. Now everybody wants it because it's been beautified. Well, don't miss out. Come to the Jewish Messiah, whoever you are, and come to Israel for the kingdom. Our offers tonight are all about it. Israel's Right to the Land. That's a very important little booklet. $3. It's a very good read. It's a scriptural proof that Israel, however it behaves, whatever it does, whatever faults you may find, et cetera, gets the land, and that's all there is to that. And also the excellent book by David Bar-Illan, Jerusalem, the Truth. His editorials right on through this peace process about what's happening with Jerusalem, and that's an upcoming debate that's going to could cause World War III in effect. So get that book. It's $10. You can get it at our post office box or with your credit card at our phone number. And Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.